Live. Yes, sir. Welcome to the Slop.Computer. Lex Node. Let me close some windows here. Get this out of here. Get this out of here. How you doing, man? Welcome to Slop.
I'm doing well. I mean, I'm just amazed by this this desktop environment. This is so. Oh wow, awesome.
Yeah. I've got the whole thing here. Yes, for sure. Yes. Welcome to the Slop. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being here on short notice. I feel like I sent you a message like yesterday and we got you in here. So super
like to move fast.
And we talked about you on another podcast. I had Worms on here and he was talking about how he launched through MetaLeX, which I think I want to dive into that and learn, because like there's so much legal uncertainty, especially as a builder, as a nerd, as a builder. Like I have no idea. I don't want to go to jail, but like I want to raise funds. And I think what you created with MetaLeX is something that helps with that. Is that true? Maybe we kick off.
Yeah, basically we automate compliant venture capital raises on chain, right? So sign with your wallet. We kind of take most of the guesswork out of the different compliance paths that exist. We try to automate as much of it as possible. Like for example, you can prove you're an accredited investor with your on-chain balances, things like that. So yeah, that's the idea.
Hell yes. Okay. And okay, so let's talk about the process of building MetaLeX.
Yeah.
Do you Claude code? Do you Codex? What's your harness? What's your LLM? What's your process?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. I mean, it's very interesting. I always wanted, ever since I got into crypto, I wasn't very technical when I first started getting interested in crypto. Like I wasn't a coder. But I'm not sort of like a power user of computers, but more so than the average lawyer, but not a coder. And I tried to do a lot of things in my spare time. Like I actually took smart contract courses. There was a company called B9 Lab back in 2017 that taught smart contract coding. So I tried to get as smart about it as possible. And I always tried to like look at my client's code, but I could never build stuff. And I always had ideas for things, especially how to put corporate finance on chain, how to put securities on chain and things like that. And now with, Claude, OpenAI, all these things, ChatGPT, I can build myself. And I do it like most of still with the smart contract stuff, we have very, very good professional devs and that's very necessary. And, I feel like we started 2 years ago, so vibe coding was not really as much of a thing then. 2.5 years ago,
it was scarier.
So, we were lucky in a sense of like having very professional web devs who established all the right scaffolding so that we can add things very modularly without incurring a lot of tech debt. But once all that is set up by professional developers, then at that point I feel like even for something that has pretty sensitive use cases like a legal technology app of sort or something with smart contracts, someone like me can come into that environment and really vibe code a lot. And I feel like it's relatively safe. And so most of the Web 2E features of our app, like the cap table feature, the boardroom feature that lets you add officers, directors, some of the document signing features, these sorts of things, we're pretty much all done by me vibe coding and just having our web devs kind of sanity check it at the end. And it's been a huge unlock. It's amazing. Yeah.
And is that something where it's like you take information from them and you put it into a legal form and you send it? Like the job of a lawyer to me is like both like super fascinating and intrinsic and like meticulous, and also like I would never want to be a lawyer, I don't think.
I think being certain types of lawyering are actually very similar to being a coder, quite honestly.
Okay.
Like if you're focused on, like I was a mergers and acquisitions attorney before crypto for 7 years, and that is essentially writing code, and it's essentially game theory as well, right? You have to write provisions that very carefully explain the rules for what people are going to do in the future, and also provide them hopefully with the right incentives to comply with that, whether that's a punishment they might receive, which could be compared to like slashing steak, right? Or reward, a payment that they'll get if they do it. And you have to code these rules very, very explicitly, if you want them to survive any kind of challenge. So in that, and sometimes, usually our documents were 150 pages, 200 pages of writing like this, right? So it's like code. It's just code that people would follow rather than machines, and a lot of the same skills, like being able to be explicit, being able to think through failure scenarios, are very similar to what a coder would do. So I actually think you'd be a good lawyer, at least with skills. Maybe not so much for litigating, but I was not very good at that either. Yeah.
I'm too sloppy. I don't know if I would. Okay, so the idea of a 180 page document.
Yes.
2 years ago, I would have been like, oh fuck no, like no, I don't want anything. But today, I can give it to my Claude, and my Claude can be like, here's what this thing's all about. So
right.
I'm guessing you're using AI not just for building, but for understanding documents, moving documents around, writing documents.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm constantly, I have a set of skills. I think I might have started with like the default Claude legal skill, but now I've, essentially forked it and evolved it a lot according to my own standards and use cases. And as I'm no longer manually drafting nearly anything. Actually, I'm pretty much drafting everything through AI. Like even if I just want to add a specific sentence that in the past I would have typed, I'm now saying add this sentence to this document, because it's just an easier. Yeah. It's kind of like my IDE for doing legal documents at this point is Claude or ChatGPT, as the case may be, or sometimes Word, but with a Claude plugin, right? And so it's almost 100% at this point of AI being involved in my legal work as well, and it's a massive time savings. I don't do a ton of client work anymore, but I still do some, and it lets me do that much more efficiently and therefore cheaply for the client, which I feel good about. And still, I would say not just at a high quality, but probably at a higher quality, because I'm less likely to commit errors because I'm tired and I miss something when I'm manually reviewing a document. I would say the affirmative drafting capability of these things is still not, it's not as good as my drafting, but as long as you don't get lazy with it and you're still reviewing things and you're improving upon whatever it initially serves you, rather proactively, I think overall the combination of me plus the AI, it's a cybernetically augmented result that is better, than what I would have done 2 years ago. Right.
You're a cyborg lawyer.
Yeah, exactly.
So when I use Claude, there's so much slop verbosity that comes out of this thing. I'm constantly like TLDR, explain like I'm 5, quit using big words, quit saying weird shit. Like, do you find it in your legal documents where it's like, we're gonna like put a belt and suspenders thing on here and smoke test this legal framework?
Yeah, it's very like, what I would say is like Claude out of the box doesn't really understand the difference between legalese and other kinds of prose writing, and it often freely intermixes those. Like it will throw some kind of like discursive paragraph that's mixing like disclosure type of content with like covenants and conditions into a single paragraph, like if you just take it in its raw state. And that is very annoying, obviously, and not what a legal contract should look like. But if you have the skills, like number one, you have skills, right? And so you can kind of address some of that, like, have a skill that says, write all of this in legalese, clearly distinguish between, recitals, which are descriptions, and covenants, which are obligations, and conditions, which are conditions precedent, and things like that. That certainly helps. It still, though, will give you some slop. Like, for example, something you may have math that is fully covered in the way that definitions are described, like formulas that are embodied in definitions. So you could say, for example, each person gets their pro rata share of the distribution amount. That would ordinarily be sufficient. That's how a good lawyer would draft it. Claude will often also add something like, a long paragraph that says, each person is getting their pro rata amount. And what that means is that it's prorated to their share ownership and blah, blah, blah. And like you clearly don't need any of that. Right.
Everyone
so you
knows
have to watch out for those things. But what you can do is you just need to have habits, right? So like one thing I do is I just have like a database of form contracts that I already know are good from before AI. And as part of my process with Claude, I will say to it, audit the draft you just did against the templates, right? And make them as similar as possible in style or whatever, right? And if you do or have those habits and have those routines and have the skills, then you end up getting not just good results, but results much better, than what you would have gotten unaugmented, right? But you have to build that discipline, right?
Skill files for builders have been what I've been thinking about a lot. And I almost see skill files as like the secret sauce, and people will share their skill files that they have for running. Like I run $1audit.com, and it's like an auditing service, but you can literally get everything for free by just going and finding all the open source stuff, plugging it into containers and running it yourself. But people still pay $1 for it because it's so cheap and it's meant to be part of like this kind of like CI/CD pipeline. But with lawyer skills, my guess is you do not open source that. That is like your secret sauce, right?
Personally, I don't really care.
Okay.
I mean, I'm competing. Definitely some, like back in the day when I was doing M&A, we had something on every deal called 280G analysis, which is essentially it's a tax analysis of like whether people are going to cross certain penalty thresholds for compensation that they'll receive in connection with a merger, right? And to me, it's just math, right? It's like you look at the statute, it's certain math that's required, and it's fine. But I remember there was this one lawyer at another law firm who I've repeatedly run across on M&A deals, and he considered his Excel spreadsheet like intellectual property. And he would never. So like on the buy side, we would always have to check, is the 280G analysis correct? And most of the lawyers, they would just send the spreadsheet and we could just check their calcs. He considered his proprietary IP, so he would just give a PDF that shows the numbers, but not have any of the underlying. And we would have to like reconstruct it, and it probably added on like $20,000 to like our client's bill, maybe even more. I don't know, on every single deal. And I just always thought it was preposterous. So I've never been that way, but certainly I imagine there are some lawyers who are that way and like jealously guard their skill files or whatever. And as AI creeps into the legal profession more, we'll probably see some more of that. But I just think it's quite absurd, honestly. But yeah.
It's Excel psychosis. When we have AI psychosis, when we think that we've generated 100 MD documents, we must have been successful at generating, research, but none of it's good.
Some of that, like in my lawyer chats, there are some lawyers who are very, very focused on AI and more so than me even. And they, when prompting was a big thing, they were like very proud of like how their special prompts, and now they're like very proud of like their special harness environments or whatever. But personally, I just think AI itself is going to eat all these advantages as every model gets better, and like the frontier model companies build their own harnesses. It's hard for me to really see an edge there, but yeah.
So let me throw you a slow pitch for me. I think we kind of talked about it, but like, what do you use for building? Like not lawyering, but actually like smart contract building. What's your stack?
It's mostly Claude Code. When Fable came out, that was kind of when I just really started going hard on the vibe coding, and it did. Like I was able to the final vision of MetaLeX is really like an all-in-one corporate finance app that lets you do all of the things that Carta, DocuSign, blah blah blah, all these apps,
all the services together
that they typically do in a Web 2 format, but then always gives you the option to tokenize and go on chain seamlessly from that, right? And we had most of the on-chain things, but what the vibe coding enabled me to do is like basically build Carta in a day, right? And so that was a huge, it's just a huge unlock, right? But I think, and so kind of it makes you say, well, why do you want to have a company that does that? Then there's no moat. Everyone could just build their own Carta. But I think the way that we've married that up with smart contract framework, and have it kind of as a one-stop shop, there still is, enough of a moat there to hopefully get network effects within our own app. But we'll see.
This is another form of psychosis, is why build it when anybody else can. Anybody
Right.
could build this shitty slop environment that I've created
Right.
here, but not anybody could have 40 episodes in 60 days or whatever I've done and got great guests like yourself on here. So it's the combination of like building a cool thing, but then like executing on it and packaging
iterating,
up other
and
things.
iterating on
Yep.
it, right? Because if you're using your own thing,
That's so
you're
cool.
going to get amazing ideas all the time and be constantly improving it. And no one is going, even though you can vibe code the basic thing from the beginning, no one is going to have that daily commitment to like be dynamically updating it based on their passion, right? And so that to me is now the differentiator.
That's like, it's like a flow state, right? Like there should be an opposite of psychosis. Like there's this psychosis of like, my bot keeps doing the same problem and I keep having to yell at it. That's definitely a psychosis. But then there's like this flow state of, I've recreated my own Calendly. I've recreated my own Granola. I have all these different services that use like nice local AI now that are like way more private. And anytime I have a new feature, I think like, oh shit, like someone wants to reschedule. Like that would be a feature request you would put into Calendly and no one would ever touch, right? But for me, it's like, 1/goal away, and now I have like meeting rescheduling. And someone used it the other day and it was smooth, and like I tested it a little bit, but like basically it worked, and it worked for someone else. And so that like flow state is really cool. And creating software is fast, but then like you said, iterating on the software is particularly special.
Yeah, I mean, what could be, you just kind of gave me an idea, right? Which is like, why can't we crowd build apps now, right? Like is there some way that, obviously it's a huge security concern, right?
This is just so scary.
But like it would be wonderful if you could, if I could vibe code a feature into the canonical Calendly app, right? And there was some kind of system, for checking that it's not some kind of hack on everyone else, or like it only appears to me, but other people can opt into it. Like, because there still are network effects, right? Like I think there's network effects from Calendly. Like my company, because it's on Calendly, I can set up these joint calendars, right? And no one has to like log into some custom system I created for that. So there are network effects from having SaaS apps. So it doesn't seem like we should just get rid of, like everyone should have their own SaaS for everything. It seems kind of silly, but on the other hand, we want the customization. So I wonder if someone will crack the magic formula on that at some point, but it seems like where this should be going. Yeah.
This is like a huge thing with security, but a huge unlock if you can figure it out. Like if you can have an agentic framework that, like, I keep thinking of all these different things I want to build that would just be super modular, but let's just say Calendly. If you have Calendly and there's hundreds of different modules that randos have made, that you could just like bloop, like one click add to your shit and have that as part of your stack, that would be a super powerful thing. And then hopefully they're open source and you could /goal, add something else to someone else's thing and remix it. But like running someone else's software is so scary right now. Like if someone's like, here, hey bro, I have the thing on GitHub, and like you go to GitHub and it's like, you got to like npx run this thing. You're basically like running a command that gives their code full access to your machine. Like that's not going to work, right? So there's got to be, and like, so there's a process of like, you could have auditors that stake on their reputation that a certain version of the code is good, and maybe those are AI auditors, and this whole thing is kind of happening automatic. But like, I still think you need some kind of like almost like isolation for these things to run on, kind of like how your cell phone has a lot of isolation, right? Like, but then
Cubes,
like apps don't
something
talk.
like that.
What was it?
Or Cubes, the Cubes operating system. Yeah, QUBES.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's like a
Linux-based operating system where basically everything is a VM, as I understand.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Like everything was a file system in Unix. They just made everything a VM. So there's like tons of good isolation and understanding between. Okay. Cool. Okay. Let's change directions a little bit. I had a really stupid question earlier. As a lawyer, how do you feel about the term smart contract?
Oh yeah, well, I mean, it's a very good term, but it was never meant to refer to like a particular style of deploying code. Like you have to go back to Nick Szabo's original essay where he coined it, and like his example was a vending machine, right? Like you're putting a dollar.
I still think of things as vending machines.
That's essentially like accepting a standing offer from whoever owns the vending machine to buy the candy within it, right? And so, but the performance, the process of entering into the contract is kind of like is automated and seamlessly integrated with the performance of the contract. So to me, like a real smart contract is actually what the entire process of, as an example, the entire process of how we close a financing ticket on MetaLeX, right? Because you have a safe displayed on one side, which is a legal agreement, right? And then you have like information you can fill out to customize the safe on the other side. And then you have a button you can click that simultaneously agrees to that safe legally and sends the money to fund the safe, thus fulfilling your obligation on the investor side. And on the issuer side, the certificate representing the safe is issued to the buyer as an NFT. So that's fulfilling the issuer's side of it. And it's a completely atomic process, so to speak. And that entire thing to me is a smart contract, right? The individual code bits that we use as part of that, it's sort of a misnomer that they're called smart contracts. I think the way Solana does it, of just calling them programs, is probably would have been more accurate, or calling them like, I think Nikolai Mishigian, rest in peace, he called them like persistent, durable, dumb software objects or something like that, which is quite a bit wordier. But that's more what they really are, but whatever. It had the effect of nerd sniping a lot of lawyers on crypto who otherwise wouldn't have been into it. So I think it was positive that that bits of code stored on a blockchain ended up being called smart contracts, but it is obviously a complete misnomer in the legal sense.
I've never heard Nikolai's last name pronounced out loud.
I don't know how to pronounce. I've never heard
that was your best shot.
On the screen. So how do you pronounce it? What's the correct way?
No. I'm not even gonna try. Yeah.
There you go.
But yes, rest in peace, man.
Yep.
Okay, MetaLeX. So you've kind of talked about it here. You're saying like the whole process is a smart contract. The code, the program that runs is just a piece of that. Yep. And you've kind of given an introduction, but like, let's say I want to, so it would be for like raising, basically. If I want to do like a normal raise where I want to get capital, do you have to be an accredited investor to
there are different pathways. There are different pathways. So if you're raising, so in the United States, every sale of a security needs to be either registered or exempt. That's the rule. As registered means registered with the SEC. So almost the vast majority of transactions are exempt because registration is very expensive, right? So that means you have to find
how expensive. I have no idea.
Well, registration basically means, for most purposes, doing an IPO. So that's like,
hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars.
Oh, yes, okay. Yeah. It's probably Lord. Like even just to do the offering is like several millions, and then you're looking at least $1 million of compliance costs per year after that, right? And it's one of the, I could get into a whole history of securities laws here. One of the unfortunate things is that it doesn't really scale. Most of the costs are fixed. So that's why you only see very large blue chip companies go public, because it's not like if you're a smaller company, your compliance costs are less, right? But anyway, so almost no one does registered offerings. So that means you have to find an exemption. There are a wide variety of exemptions that you can do, but by far the most common one in the US for a capital raise is called Regulation D. And Regulation D has various sub items within it. But by far the most common one is Rule 506, right? And by far the most common subprong of Rule 506 is 506B, which is an exemption for a privately advertised round. You have to have a reasonable belief that the participants are accredited investors. There's some allowance for unaccredited, but almost no one uses that for various reasons. And so basically, yes, it's for accredited investors. A lot of times you just need to have a reasonable belief, which is accredited, which includes that they're making the rep that they're accredited. If you can also publicly advertise a round. And right now MetaLeX is doing a round for itself that actually is publicly advertised. Like on our X page, you can go you'll see the pin post is, we are doing an on-chain preferred stock sale for MetaLeX Labs. You could go on-chain right now and you can permissionlessly buy MetaLeX preferred stock. But to do that, you have to be what's called a verified accredited investor, which means that you're going to have to prove to me that you have more than $1 million in net worth, or that you had more than $200,000 in income for the 2 prior years, right? So if you can prove that to me, then I'll accept your ticket and around and you can buy it. So those are the most common exemptions. There's also an exemption called Regulation S, which means that you're excluding Americans to a certain standard, and you're only allowing non-US persons in. And there's variations of all these things, but those are the 2 most common ones used on MetaLeX.
That was great. That's a great speed run of Reg D, and I know this from afar because I've heard people say the things before, but that's a lot. That's a good speed run. So so the reason why the SEC does this is to protect people from aping into something that doesn't make sense. Sorry, this is like stupid low-level stuff, but as a programmer,
no, it's fine.
Like
I think a lot of these things are, people get confused about them. Like, for example, I often hear there's a rule that only accredited investors can exist, but that can invest. That's actually not true. There's no such rule. It's actually an exception from a normal rule that if someone is accredited, then they don't have to comply with as many rules, right? And so people just get very confused about these things. So yeah, the basic questions are good ones.
But like when I think of a meme coin on Pump.Fun that is about to rug, and an IPO from fucking Anthropic, there's a lot of room in between there. And the SEC charging millions of dollars to IPO is crazy. That doesn't scale. Obviously there's a lot of room to work here, and a lot of like gray area in which we could improve this system. And it kind of seems like that's one thing that you're kind of pushing on with MetaLeX. Yeah.
I mean, one thing that I think a lot of people, I think there is untapped potential within current laws. For example, there is something called Rule 144. Rule 144 says that if you bought a security in the type of round I was talking about earlier, a Regulation D round, which that's typically referred to as a restricted security. After 1 year of holding, that actually essentially becomes, let's just say, becomes unrestricted. Like the person can actually sell that security without having to register that offer, right? And peer-to-peer securities transactions are legal, right? So in theory, a lot of people could be selling a lot of securities after they've invested in a private round, for example. Why is it not happen at more scale? I definitely think one of the reasons is the technology. Just most securities markets are heavily intermediated, heavily curated. They're not peer-to-peer, and so they do have very heavy overhead. But we can fix that with blockchain, right? So part of the reason why
exactly that's what I'm getting to
is I want to scale up the peer-to-peer aspect of securities transactions, which is perfectly legal, but currently very underutilized. The other reason is that really, really good companies like to control their liquidity paths. Like you saw what just happened with SpaceX. They basically did the classic low float, high FDV play, but for stocks, right? And they basically were able to force everyone, because this is the only way you could possibly acquire exposure to SpaceX. They were basically able to force a bunch of market participants to agree to like an enormously high starting valuation so that they can juice it as much as possible. And naturally, it's gone down enormously since then, right? Because it was the starting point was so artificial. The starting point was not determined by a market. So if you are SpaceX, or you are Anthropic, or you are one of these blue chips, you are going to want to preclude peer-to-peer transactions in your securities until you're ready to do it. But there's a long tail of companies that are not at the level of SpaceX, Anthropic, et cetera. And so now some people would say, well, those are all dog shit companies that no one should want to buy. There's definitely are people who believe that, right? But I personally believe that's not the case. There are a lot of interesting companies that will never be IPO worthy that people might want to buy and trade in. And we are going after that. So like the people who did primary raises and sold safes on MetaLeX our liquidity aspect of our protocol is in audit right now with Hexen.
Can we tangent to Safe? What is Safe real quick? Safe is like a different.
Safe is a simple agreement for future equity. It's essentially a convertible instrument that like you buy early when you don't want to have a lot of overhead to like sell an actual stock, because there's reasons why that can have overhead. So it's just a very simple agreement created by Y Combinator that is very standardized, and people buy in like pre-seed rounds and seed rounds mostly, and sometimes even in A rounds, which drive me nuts, but whatever. So we have people who have done seed and pre-seed rounds on MetaLeX and sold tokenized safes. And now we have people who have held for a year or more of those safes. So we can now go to those companies and we can say, hey, why don't you turn on the transferability and use our new liquidity features and let people sell their safes or a portion of their safes? And we can create a bit of a market in it. So this is like the next wave of what we want to tackle.
Hell yeah. Okay. And like the money going to those long tail companies is way more useful. like there's so many long tail companies, and right now there's never been a better time to be an entrepreneur. You can get product market fit with Claude and Cursor. You can get traction. You can get people using your product, but then you need an adult. Like you get to the point where you've built something and it doesn't scale and it's going to fall over. If you could raise some funds and hire your first developer, your first lawyer, like that money is very, very important. So I think you immediately threw everybody down the long tail into the dog shit category, because I think you were making an example. But I feel like the long tail is the most important, and I think that's what you're attacking. But I think that I don't know. And all of this stuff seems like it should be coming on chain, and I think you're also seeing that and heading in that direction.
Yeah, I mean, it's just it's a hugely interesting time, because not only are we now at the point of the technology where there are enough libraries and there are enough types of Uniswap v4 hooks or whatever you might want to be able to build stuff with tokenized securities, but and then the vibe coding aspect that makes it all more efficient to build these things, but also the SEC is on board with this type of stuff for the first time ever. They have on their docket Rule 144, which I can only believe means making it more liberal, not less liberal, most likely. They already released a thing saying that if you run a web interface for a DeFi protocol that trades in tokenized securities, that doesn't necessarily make you a broker, right? Which is amazing. Even if you take transaction-based compensation off of the protocol, right? So this is all coming together at once, and my hope is that it can really be a disruptive moment where the capital markets for securities become much more permissive and much more entrepreneur friendly, right?
Is regulation going to? I feel like it was Danny Ryan who said this in an interview I had with him at the beginning of the year. It might have even been the beginning of last year. I can't remember. Time goes by quick. But we were talking about how regulation has kind of swung. The pendulum has swung in one direction now. The SEC is talking about, fine, we can bring things on chain. The president's launching a fucking meme coin. like regulation has swung in one direction. Do you think it will swing back in another direction in a couple of years? Like, what do you think? I mean, it's so hard to predict the future, but what happens when that happens? Like, is a lot of this stuff going to be like set, or is it going to all get rolled back?
There's certainly a high risk of that, especially because the Clarity Act, I think, would have sealed a lot of it and made a lot of it irreversible, right? But it's now looking like we're at high risk of the Clarity Act not passing. And obviously, I think it's both a good and a bad thing that we have a very ambitious SEC commissioner SEC chair and also SEC commissioners who kind of want to put their stamp on history by issuing very bold guidance that does these things. But an SEC policy, just as they are reversing Gensler policies, the next person will be able to reverse them. So what I would have loved is to get really good legislation on these things. Nonetheless, the SEC coming out with certain rules, certain guidance, etc., although it is going to be reversible, if a Democrat, an Elizabeth Warren style regime gets in power, say, and they want to reverse this, what I do think it will be very both politically and legally hard for them to do is profoundly punish people for what happened during this time, right? They can try to limit its growth and get people to stop doing it, but I think it will be very hard to throw them in prison because of it, given that there are governmental bodies currently saying these things are okay. Generally, you don't throw people in prison for something that the government was saying is okay, right? So that aspect is good because it does give us a space to do these experiments currently with relatively little fear of retribution, but it is possible some of these experiments will be shut down under, an Elizabeth Warren style political regime in the future.
And to be clear, like, I'm not putting all of crypto in a good bucket that should continue. Right. There's like I always talk about, like, when you get to the front gates of crypto, you have to wade through about 20 feet of shit before you get inside the castle, and then you realize like all the really cool stuff that is there and how neat all of this like technology is and decentralization is. So just to put that disclaimer on there, there's a lot of gnarly garbage.
I'm with you, but on the other hand, like, it's interesting. Like, I really was not a meme coin guy. Like, I was not a Solana guy last cycle, so I missed out on a lot of financial opportunity from that. And I had a little bit of what's really going on here. Is this really, like, this is very different from why I got into crypto type of thing. But on the other hand, what I do, everything in crypto that ends up taking off is actually, if you really look at it and analyze it, there was a leap in what Nick Szabo called social scalability that enabled that thing to take off. So even Pump Fund, like, as much as people like to say it's degen or whatever, it's PvP. Ultimately, what they did is they trust mitigated the process of launching a coin through smart contract rules. Like, there's this graduation process, it locks certain liquidity. And so really, they actually did do trust minimization, and that's what enabled this meme coin market to scale fantastically. So like, even though there's some quote unquote bad things that happen from that or whatever, there is, at its core, there is trust mitigation and social scalability that is added from blockchain technology at the heart of every innovation that becomes big from a market perspective in crypto, in my opinion.
Oh yeah. And even like, just to give Solana and Pump.Fun and even the FOMO wallet, like, the UX is so good. Like, you can bring $100 in and you can get into a meme coin, and it's going to go up quickly and then it's going to go down quickly. And that is a rush. Like, that is a weird feeling to see your money go like that. And there's a lot of power.
What ultimately enables the UX to be good is smart contract, immutable smart contract assurances that underlie. That person can't rug that liquidity that's in the market, right? And that enables you to buy it and speculate on it more easily. And prior to Pump Fund, that was a huge issue that capped the scaling of these types of meme coins and cultural coins, right? So I think it is positive.
But the SASBO thing, the coordination thing, like, the reason why these smart contracts are so cool is because you can write some rules, everyone can see the rules, and everyone participates in this game by, like, basically trusting nothing more than the rules. You don't have to trust the human anywhere.
Yes.
There's much more to do here other than pump and dumps, right?
For sure,
There's so much more to build with these trust mechanisms. And every time we try to do it, like DAOs, they end up getting just, like, totally overrun by blood-sucking people trying to get capital.
This is why I came up with the concept of BORGs, right? Cybernetic orgs, which is really, ultimately what we're doing at MetaLeX as well, even though we won't use that term much anymore. But the problem that I think has occurred, right, is that, yes, these are great trust mitigation tools, but they don't mitigate trust on everything. But most of the people who were doing DAOs, for example, that was like the only, they didn't have a corporate law background. They didn't know how normal entities work. So they saw that the problems that they could solve with code, they solved those problems. But for example, when it came to any type of thing that you couldn't cover with the code, like whether someone just like stops working off chain, they just stop doing their job, they didn't have any type of tool for that. Because they didn't like to use legal agreements and things like that. They just say, oh, well, you lose your reputation. But it turns out like losing your reputation, a lot of people, there's a price at which most people would sell their reputation, right? So, and it's like hard to detect, hard to attribute. Like you can like it's basically like there's a potential slashing event, but like a lot of times you'll get away with it because it's unattributable or unprovable, right? And so people just left gaps. Right. So I think if you take the best of smart contracts and you add legal agreements to do the things that smart contracts can do, then you really have the best of both worlds instead of the worst of both worlds. And you can really get magical results that you could never get in the old world. Right. Rage quit in DAOs is a beautiful thing. The idea that you can just take all your money out at any time and no one can stop you. And that's like if you have that really mitigates the need to bring fiduciary duty lawsuits in a lot of cases. The problem is there's something called intellectual property. There's certain things that can't be put on chain. And so you would need to have a legal rule about how to rage quit that. And no one thought about how to do that part, right? But yeah.
How to rage quit the IP and how to basically like split it up. Like you get this and it's like a messy divorce when someone wants to rage quit an org and they came up with the hard,
right? You could just have an automatic license, license that everyone gets, like NFT, a perpetual, fully paid up, royalty free, sub distributable, blah blah blah, like license for and let people do it. But it's just not. Most of the people doing DAOs didn't know about licenses, right? So they just wasn't done, right?
You probably see that a lot as a lawyer looking into the crypto world. They're trying to recreate all this shit that has been worked on for hundreds of years.
Yes.
I don't know if I really have a question there. I'm firm in the non-lawyer area, so I like to just build things and mess around with slot machines on chain. No, NFT distribution platforms. Yes.
Right. Yes. Very cool. I mean, the FWA and all that stuff.
FWA is dope.
I want to do, since the way our securities protocol works at MetaLeX is it actually starts with NFTs, and then they are you can do what we call scriptification. You can turn the units represented by the NFTs into ERC20s, either partially or fully. And so and you can convert back and forth. What I would love to do is a gotcha game with securities NFTs. So there's already FWA.fun. I want to do RWA.fun and get all the cool startups in crypto to offer a little bit of their cap table toward this and let people win securities NFTs. So I'm working on that. We'll see if I can get it to happen. But yeah,
that's fun. Okay, let's see. Claude usually has a couple questions. Can I get him in here for a question?
Yeah, absolutely.
Let me have him ask it now. Let's see. So he looks at the transcript, looks at the research, and then comes up with something to ask.
Very cool.
You defended the Tornado Cash devs corner hard. Where's the legal line between writing code and operating a service? And is it actually settled yet?
Yeah, the question is about essentially like mixer protocols or privacy protocols, and like what's the liability of someone who writes the code or perhaps also deploys the code, or perhaps also makes money from the code. Which of those things is the line? Or
a lot of gray lines there.
Yeah. To when you might be considered to be operating that as a money services business, or as what in Europe what's called a CASP, a crypto asset service provider, or what in offshore jurisdictions are called a virtual asset service provider, a VASP, or something like that, right? And no one really knows exactly where the line is. Like, it hasn't been clearly defined. What I personally think the weakness is in the original Tornado Cash protocol is, well, there's two things people might argue as a weakness. Number one, running a front end that facilitates using the smart contracts. Number two, the role of what's called a relayer, which is essentially an intermediary who pays the gas for someone to be able to unshield their money from the protocol, in a way that doesn't tie it back to their original address, right? Because you have to get the gas from somewhere, the ETH, to pay the transaction fee. So there's these relayers. They basically pay transaction fees to Ethereum for someone to unshield their transaction to a fresh address and delink it from their old ones. So those are the two weak points in Tornado Cash. On the front end stuff, I think we're getting good things. Like, for example, Treasury backed off its viewpoint that people who operate DeFi front ends are brokers from a tax law point of view. So that's very good. The SEC came out with guidance that says the same thing in the securities law arena. And FinCEN has said things that indicate that they don't necessarily view running such a front end as being a money services business. So those are all positive on the front end aspects. The relayer thing is a real problem, in my opinion. Ethereum itself is planning a fork to enable getting rid of the relayer role in privacy protocols. I don't know exactly how it works off the top of my head. You might know better, since I believe you work for the EF, right? Or you still work for the EF? Yeah. Yep. So you might know better. I don't remember all the details of that, but the core point is there is an Ethereum upgrade that can be done that will get rid of this relayer role in privacy protocols. And to me, once that happens, now you can at least build a good privacy protocol on Ethereum that doesn't have any intermediaries anymore and doesn't involve anyone operating a money services business. So I think that will get rid of the weak points. The Clarity Act had something in it that would have clarified some of these things as well, but I don't know if that's going to pass. So that's essentially the line. You need to get rid of the intermediary type roles and just have a decentralized autonomous protocol that's not operating a financial service.
So I think it's frames. I think once we have frames, that's like the end all be all of account abstraction. It'll probably come in the next one, not this one. So we probably have a year before that. You didn't mention OFAC sanctions, which I would have said was the number one wrong thing with Tornado Cash. The way you're seeing it is like from a very cyberpunk standpoint, these are the two things that are wrong with Tornado Cash: the relaying and the front end. But like from a 1 foot in crypto, 1 foot in lawyer, I would think that OFAC sanctions, and that's the thing.
You're very right to point that out. So there's two potential liability paths associated with these things. One is, are you running a money services business that requires a license and complying with various AML rules? That's kind of what I addressed in my first response. The other one is, are you facilitating a transaction with a sanctioned person, right? Now, it's very obvious if you're running an intermediary and that intermediary is interacting with sanctioned persons, then you're also facilitating a sanctioned transaction. There are other ways you could be facilitating, though, and that's for example, so that's where the role of certain precautions comes in, right? Like, for example, if an address is on the OFAC list, yes, you would want to blacklist that address from a front end that was helping use that, because otherwise you would be facilitating a transaction with a sanctioned person. But the OFAC stuff, the worst thing that they tried to do was call a smart contract itself a sanctioned person, and that got defeated. So that's very good. I don't think they're going to try that again. The Coin Center did brilliant work there, and they got that defeated. It was an overreach of their statutory authority, but there's still this facilitation issue, and it just means that wallets, front ends, exchanges are going to have to just keep updating that blacklist of addresses. But if they do that, they should be fine.
And an interesting thing, just like you can use ETH skills to prompt your agent to build, like you can build front ends now.
Yes.
You can, and I used CAF's CLI for Railgun the other day, and it was like 15 minutes. Like my agent went from discovering what the Kohaku CLI was to putting money into the shielded pool in 15 minutes. He just needed the ETH. And once people realize that they can just like express their intent and their money can go do the things they need to do, I think that will be very powerful, and this front end issue will go away.
Yeah, AI. I think AI is like a super important piece of like that kind of completes the crypto self-sovereignty picture, because look, I sit on a multi-sig with PCF Versio, who just got added to the EF board, one of the most cypherpunk guys. And he every time we have to sign a transaction, he has all these tools that like validate the transaction, and he's checking every little thing. But it used to require a lot of technical expertise that would be beyond me. But now with AI, I can do the same thing very easily, right?
Yep.
And if someone took down a particular front end for a particular AMM or like Aave's front end or whatever, I could point an AI at the smart contracts and say, build me a UI that lets me do this for myself. And then like, there's clearly no intermediary anymore. It's clearly completely peer-to-peer. There's no legal attack vector. So it really kind of completes the picture, for people who aren't computer scientists. Right?
Hell yeah. Yes. And I think I'm trying it right now. There's actually a wallet in here where we can set us up as signers, and then you can basically just express your intent to it. It also has clear signing. It has a special AI layer that like looks at the call data and tells you like what does this look like? Like we could even just like swap, X for Y right here, and it's going to just go do that thing. So I think the technology is here for people to be far more cypherpunk. It's like there's some scary regulation here and there that. Okay, so let's end on that. Like the Clarity Act. If it's not going to pass, like what do we do from here? Or like what is the most important thing to happen for Ethereum after Clarity doesn't pass? I guess.
The CROP's mission of eliminating intermediaries at every part of the stack as much as possible. That the good thing, although the US does have some of the heaviest financial regulations, so in that sense it's kind of like the toughest jurisdiction for crypto. On the other hand, it also has the best constitutional rights, right? And so what I'm very confident of is if two people do a transaction peer-to-peer, truly peer-to-peer, that is going to be outside of almost all burdensome regulations. And so if we can, like you said, with the frames, getting rid of relayer roles, like making it super easy for people to like spin up their own RPCs or whatever they need to do to have their own stuff, that means that like Ethereum is going to be very independent of any evil things or censorious things that governments might do in the future, right? And so I think the EF, by coming out with this crops focus, is exactly the right focus that they should have. It's the one thing that truly makes a blockchain unique from other types of fintech apps. It's not as sexy maybe for the price of ETH because people want moats and they want like services that can be monetized, like what Near has. Like I love Near.com wallet with its intents and all that stuff. Amazing UX, amazing consumer product. I totally get why they're leaning into that and how it might be bullish for Near. But at the end of the day, it's these intents, I would say the way they have them are like a pretty intermediated service, right? And very vulnerable to regulation. So I think, it's more like a fintech of some sort. And Ethereum is more like the true pure play of freedom technology.
Hell yeah. Okay, we got to close those vulnerabilities out.
Yeah.
And close this episode out. Let me have Claude give us the outro. Thank you so much, LeXscroW. Thank you for being here. I'll keep an eye on MetaLeX.
Get on with you and be able to converse with you a bit. And thanks so much for inviting me.
That's the show. Homies.
Thanks for being here.
LeXscroW gave us the Reg D speedrun, cyborg lawyering with Claude, on-chain safes, and Rule 144. Why the vending machine was the original smart contract, and where the legal line sits between writing code and running a service. Code plus law, best of both worlds. Follow him at Lex_node. Check out MetaLeX. See you next time. GM.
MetaLeX. All right. Thanks, man. Thanks for being here. Have a good one. See you.